I think many parents would agree that summer vacations with infants or young children can feel more like trips rather than vacations because young children still need round the clock care and they have the ability to derail any plans very quickly. I often share how I hit rock bottom on a trip that we were on before we had Addison sleeping well, and it was the worst. In today's episode, I want to help you navigate the sleep aspect of your summer trips so that all the other pieces can flow more smoothly. Hi, I'm Allison Edgety, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of two. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. Yesterday, I was coaching in my monthly membership community, and one of the moms was looking for some advice on travel because she's already had a few not so great trips with her toddler. I truly believe that nothing can derail a trip faster than an overtired child or baby. I also believe that having a good plan around how you're going to handle your child's sleep can be the cornerstone for an enjoyable trip or vacation. So let's talk about the summer's travel. First, let's dive into the travel day. If you're traveling by car, the best thing you can do is work to ensure that your child takes their naps during their typical nap windows. It can be tempting to just let your little ones sleep whenever they want in hopes of getting as much quiet time during that drive as possible. But the potential problem with that approach is that you arrive at your destination and your child is already off of their sleep schedule. Now, if you have a child who is prone to falling asleep in the car, I really find that the easiest way to keep the naps on schedule is to have a parent, assuming that you have two of you in the car, sit in the back and engage with the baby or child until you're within about 15 minutes of their typical nap start time. Then once you're in that window, you can climb back in front, turn off the music, turn on some white noise. I'll link to my favorite travel white noise machine in the show notes, and sit quietly until your child falls asleep. Once they're asleep, you can totally go back to quietly chatting with your partner and or listening to music or your favorite podcast, and your child will likely just keep snoozing with that little bit of background noise. If your child really likes to sleep in the car, you may find that you need to wake them up from that nap to protect their next nap start window and or to protect their bedtime. It's fine to let them sleep a little bit longer than usual because car sleep isn't as restorative as flat, motionless sleep, but I don't want them to sleep too much outside of their typical nap window because it could affect everything else going forward that day. So once they're up or they've been up for a while, if you're on a longer car ride, you may once again need to entertain them in some way. Either get back in the back, if that's an option, to entertain them, or have an older child entertain them all the way up until they hit their next nap window. Now, let's talk about flying, which is a little bit more of a wild card. Obviously, it's going to be trickier to maintain your child's sleep schedule when you fly. I have a preference for flying earlier in the day so that if all else fails, for the most part, I realize there could be huge failures, but typically if all else fails, I could protect bedtime. But that's not always possible, particularly these days. And if you're able to book a flight that aligns with your child taking a nap while they're on the flight and that works for your child, that's amazing because the plane is like a huge white noise machine. But again, not always possible. So if you can't do that, don't panic. Depending on your child's age, I'm just going to recommend that you take sleep where you can get it. Younger babies often sleep fairly well on the airplanes because, like I said, it's like a big white noise machine. But sometimes as babies get older, even if they are on the plane during nap time, it can be a bit of a struggle to get them to sleep because there's a lot going on, a lot that they want to see. So that may mean that you're having your child sneak in their nap while they're in the stroller or in the carrier while you're walking through the airport or waiting to board a plane, or maybe it's in the car on the way to your destination after you landed. If you have a child that's still napping, chances are, even if you squeeze in naps where you can on that travel day, they are going to have less total day sleep during this daytime where there's a flight involved than they typically would get at home. And it will likely not all occur during those typical nap windows like I hope to help you maintain during a road trip. Stressing about this isn't too helpful. There's already enough going on these travel days. I actually just found out it took my husband 12 hours to get somewhere today. There are lots of delays and bumped flights, so there's already enough to worry about. Try not to stress about the sleep other than knowing you'll take it where you can get it and remembering that an early bedtime is your friend. Speaking of the early bedtime, I actually recommend building that into your schedule for the day you arrive. Plan to put your child to bed 30, 45, maybe even 60 minutes earlier than usual, and then they can make up for some of that missed daytime sleep and start the next day well rested. Of course, if they happen to have amazing sleep on that travel day, you can just put them down at their typical time. And if your travel day turns into a disaster, you'll just put them down as early as you can, and you may need to factor in an earlier bedtime the second night. All right, so now you have made it to your destination, and now we need to set up your child's sleep space or sleep environment. First of all, it's summertime, so the days are longer. I like to try to black out my children's room as much as possible. So at hotels, that's usually fairly easy because most hotels have great blackout shades. In fact, it's like the kind we all aspire to have. But at an Airbnb or a home rental, it can be a little trickier. My favorite hack that is just easy as it relates to packing and having things that you can arrive with and put into place quickly are big black garbage bags and painter's tape so it won't damage any walls or paint, and to cover up either all or part of the window to make that room blackout. And if you have a child sleeping in a crib or a pack and play, the slumber pod is another great blackout tool because it allows you to put your child in their own blackout space, and it too is easy to travel with. The slumber pod is also amazing if you need to room share with your kiddo on a trip, or if your child needs to room share with another child, a sibling, because again, it gives that one child their own blackout space and they won't see you or their sibling just laying in the bed right next to them. Not that they won't know you're in there, but they won't just be sitting there staring at you, and they'll be in their own little cocoon. And if you're interested in purchasing a slumber pod, you can use my affiliate discount code, which is Sleep and Wellness 20 to save $20. I will add a link to that in the show notes. You also want to be able to replicate your child's sleep setup and routine as much as possible. That means you want to bring their typical or favorite jammies, sleep sack, travel white noise, bedtime books. For my kids, I still travel with their toddler pillows, so they always have that pillow that they are comfortable sleeping with. And I even have families who will bring the sheet that their baby slept in so they could put it on the crib mattress in their new location, and that sheet will smell like home. If you have an older child who uses a toddler clock or sleep light, do not forget to bring that too. That thing is magic, and I use it in hotels. We use it everywhere we go. Now that you have the room set up, I want to share two very important pieces of advice. The first is to maintain your child's sleep schedule to the very best of your ability. So if your child is still napping, I recommend planning your days around those naps. If you have a child who takes more than one nap a day, I totally get and appreciate that there may be days that some of those naps have to happen on the go. But try to have even those on-the-go naps happen in the correct window, so that right timing, by having a plan. Don't plan to be in the middle of an exciting activity at the exact time that your toddler needs a nap. If you know that your child sleeps well in the stroller or while baby wearing, plan to be able to do that during that nap window. Although I'll tell you a quick funny story. We took our kids to Disney multiple times when they were younger, all the way up until COVID, because my parents don't live too far from Orlando, and we always had to fly into Orlando. So we were frequent annual Disney goers. And Ainsley, who's my more naturally inclined to sleep child, did a nap during the main parade in the afternoon in Magic Kingdom, which if you have been there, you know it is so loud, and we were front and center along the road that it went through. And I got her to fall asleep in her stroller, which she was good about doing, prior to the parade starting, because we had missed it the year before to protect her nap, and we really wanted to see it for Addison that second year. And so I got her to fall asleep, and I did a little cross my fingers thinking, oh, I hope she could pull it off. And part of the reason I did it is she's my more flexible child, and I knew I'd put her to bed early if it didn't go well. And she wasn't an infant. She was down to one nap a day. And you guys, she slept through the entire parade. So while I tell you to set up your child for success, even for these on-the-go naps, I'm also just going to add this little tidbit that we have to know our child. That would have never in a million years worked for Addison. Never in a million years. She would have never slept through a parade. But for Ainsley, it did work out. But what I did do is I had her skip the parade because I knew she needed that nap. And so I made an effort to get her to sleep beforehand, knowing she was tiny. She could see the parade in another year when she could stay up through that time. All right, now that I've got on that side tangent, my second piece of advice is to move forward with the assumption that your child is not going to have issues sleeping in this new location. So particularly for those of you who are traveling for the first time with your child this summer, and I've heard from a lot of you, I want you to assume that it's going to go well. That doesn't mean it's going to, but we're going to assume that it will because sometimes our kids surprise us. So put your child to bed or down for their naps at their typical time. Do their typical routine, whether it be for bedtime or for nap, and just put them down like you typically would. Assume that it's just going to be just like it would at home. If they are thrown off by this new environment and it's not going well, it's okay to provide a little extra support while they adjust. Maybe they need a little extra back rubbing or for you to come back and check on them a few times. But I just don't want you to assume that they need that extra help. And then if they do need it, don't jump right to the top of doing all the things. See if you can just gently reassure them and guide them and get them back on track as quickly as possible. When we polled the moms in my membership about travel questions when we were preparing for this episode, one very interesting one came up that I really think could affect a lot of the preschool parents in my world. This mom asked about her 3-year-old who is still in a crib, but can no longer fit in a pack and play. First of all, if you have a child who is still in their crib, I strongly encourage you to listen to episode 26, where I discuss the crib to bed transition. So if you won't have access to a full-size crib on your trip and your 3-year-old no longer fits in a travel crib, don't panic. This actually happened to me with Ainsley, and I had to have her sleep in a bed several times between the age of 3 and 4 years old while she still slept in her crib at home, and it was fine. I assure you, this does not have to be a big sleep disruptor. So go ahead and let your child know that on this trip, there is not going to be a crib big enough for them, and they will need to sleep in a bed or on a travel mattress. I'll link to an example of one of those in the show notes, and just tell them the plan. Like if you'll be room sharing with your child or sharing a bed even with your child, explain how that's going to work. Tell them that you'll do their typical bedtime routine. You're going to put them to bed. And then when it's time for you to go to bed, you're going to quietly come back in and get in bed with them. Because I also don't want them to wake up and be startled that you're in there. So you want to tell them what to expect. You should still do the same routine and don't make too big of a deal about this kind of new setup that they'll be in a bed versus a crib. If your child does seem anxious, just plan to come back and check on them a few times as they're falling asleep and be sure to explain that that's what you're going to do. Oh, I'll come back and check on you every few minutes until you fall asleep. What I don't recommend doing is transitioning your child out of the crib at home to prepare for a trip. You want that crib to bed transition to happen because it's the right time and your child is ready. If you jump the gun on this transition, it may not go well at home, first of all, and then you're going to have a different situation. And then it may also just cause more struggles when you're traveling. And then, of course, when you return. So it's better to kind of take that risk while you're on the trip than to risk it affecting all the things. I also don't want you to make a big deal about the fact that they will be sleeping in that bed or that they will be sharing a bed with you while you're on vacation. You just want to be kind of matter of fact about it. This is our setup while we're on this trip. And if you talk it up like it's so cool, then you're going to create the possibility that your child's going to resist going back into their crib when you get home because you've talked up being in the bed as being so cool. So we want to be really careful about that. Speaking about coming back home and getting back into their own beds, I want you to plan for a reset immediately when you get home. Even if sleep went better than you expected, there's very few scenarios where it's going to be perfect and your child's not going to come home tired. Or if sleep went terribly sideways, and let's say you end up co-sleeping, even though that was not your plan at all, I assure you it can all be fixed. But the reset is going to be much faster if you don't let any of these less than ideal sleep habits linger once you get home. Go right back to your typical sleep schedule, to your typical bedtime and nap routines, and to your typical nighttime expectations. If you previously had to do some sleep training with your child and the method worked well, you may need to use it for a few days to help your child reset. If you have a preschooler, be sure to tell them how excited you are to get back home so everyone can sleep in their own comfy, cozy beds all night. And remind them of the sleep expectations that you have at home during the night. All right, before I wrap up, I want to give one more plug for maintaining your child's sleep schedule when you travel. During the first 2 years of my parenthood journey, I did not do that. But once we got our sleep in order, maintaining sleep schedules literally became my number one priority when we traveled, and it changed everything for the better for us. We ended up doing so much more travel after I made that mindset shift, and we enjoyed our traveling so much more. We traveled by car. We traveled by airplane. We stayed in hotels. We stayed in rentals. And we even went on a 2-week international trip with our girls when they were both preschoolers. All of that was really quite enjoyable, even though I would still classify it as a trip rather than a vacation. But we had a lot of fun because I knew I wasn't going to have overtired children who were crumbling as that trip went on. And I knew I was going to reset everything the second I got home. After the challenging last couple of years we've all been through, I really hope that you and your family get a chance to enjoy some fun and memorable trips this summer. I'd love for you to tag me in your room setup pics on Instagram at Sleep and Wellness Coach so that I can see how you set up your child's sleep environment in all the new locations. And if you ever need to strategize around sleep related to a specific trip, you can always schedule a 30-minute call with me through sleepandwellnesscoach.com. All right. Thanks for joining me again this week. I hope you'll come back next week for an episode that I am personally very excited about. I'll be chatting with an esthetician all about sunscreen. We're going to completely geek out on this topic. All right. Bye for now.